As most people who watch this channel on the regular will probably know, Horizon Zero Dawn is one of my most anticipated games for 2017. And now we have a few comments from the lead writer John Gonzalez about the game, thanks to a new, rather lengthy report from Game Informer. I will link that particular report in the description below this video, so I suggest you give it a read if you are interested. There is quite a bit of information there that I will not be discussing here, because again, it's very, very long. But I want to touch on a few interesting things that John had to say. And he said, quote, "For people who are story junkies, for people who like to collect every audio log or text log out there, people want to have a grand narrative to their game, I think they're going to be really surprised and delighted by what we have in store for them." He also touched on a little bit the RPG mechanics that will be present in Horizon Zero Dawn, and according to John, these particular mechanics won't be very deep, and apparently that particular design decision was a deliberate one by Guerrilla, so they didn't overwhelm or confuse players. And he said, quote, "What we wanted to avoid is complicated menus. We also didn't want to go too deep with the RPG features we were developing. We wanted to have a certain level of accessibility and understandability for players. We also didn't want to go too hardcore with stats, so at one point we just cut it off and said we aren't going to go any further because it would confuse players." Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that the RPG mechanics in Horizon Zero Dawn are going to be overly simplistic. Obviously, they're not going to be deep RPG mechanics because, well, this isn't really an RPG. It's one of the many, many games that is an action game, but with RPG elements of crafting and such. But they don't want to go too deep down that rabbit hole. They don't want to spending half the game in menus because, like, oh, do I want this sword with like +2 fire damage, or do I want this sword with it's slightly less damage, but you know it does poison damage over time? You know, that's the kind of thing they wanted to avoid, and you know the kind of sort of min-maxing you might find yourself doing in an RPG where you're swapping out gear and that sort of thing. So while that sort of thing is obviously going to be present in the game to some degree, they haven't gone too deep down it because, you know, it's not really that type of game. It's got RPG mechanics, but it's not an RPG, obviously. However, going back to his story comments earlier, it does sound that there's going to be quite a lot of exploration encouragement going on in this game. You know, for example, if you've got audio logs and text logs out there, you know, you need to perhaps hunt them down and go exploring to find them, find more about the lore, that sort of thing. That definitely sounds good to me because obviously that's one of the great things about Dark Souls, for example, that obviously, you know, it's very different in terms of the storytelling method. That is very sort of beneath the surface, but obviously you kind of have to explore, find items, read the descriptions, that sort of thing, and read between the lines to get into the lore. And obviously, while Horizon Zero Dawn is probably going to have cutscenes and a bit more surface story than Dark Souls, you're also going to have these audio logs and text logs that are there out in the world for you to explore if you want to get deeper into that lore and get more involved in this world. And if the world is interesting enough, then yeah, people are going to want to explore that. And while I'm not a 100% collectathon person myself, I definitely will be trying to at least get a few of these audio logs if they've done the Bioshock thing of having them play while you actually play the game, because when it's through the menu, just no. I will just not bother. No matter how interesting the story is, I will just not bother, because I don't want to sit in the menu for 10 minutes while some guy waffles on. It's just not happening. So, either way, it sounds really interesting, and Horizon Zero Dawn is looking very damn promising, to say the least. But of course, we should wait to see what it's actually like when we play it. But of course, we've got to wait quite some time. But at least until then, we have many, many good games on the horizon. Thank you very much for watching, guys. As always, your support is highly appreciated, and I'll see you next time.